Hi, my name is Remy Morris, and I wanted to introduce myself before we hop into today's lesson. So, three things about me. The first is that I am a person with lived experience in the child welfare system. The second thing is that I started a business where I educate and prepare families who are experiencing the child welfare system as a way to prevent them from experiencing some of the challenges my family and I face. And lastly, which I think is the most cool fact about myself, is that I am the second oldest of 11 children. Now, if you're here to learn more about advocacy and get some tips and pointers, you're in the right place. Let's hop into today's lesson. So let's start at the beginning. What even is advocacy? So the thing is, advocacy has a lot of definitions because it can look so very different, which we'll talk more about in today's lesson. But for the sake of having a definition, let's use this one here. So, the Missouri Foundation for Health says that advocacy is defined as any action that speaks in favor of, recommends, argues for a cause, supports or defends, or pleads on behalf of others. Long winded, right? But don't worry, we'll break that down in today's lesson. We'll talk about what advocacy is, can be, and if it's right for you. So, now that we've kind of talked about what advocacy is, let's talk about what an advocate is. So, the definition is a person who publicly supports or has recommendations for a cause. Some other, maybe more familiar synonyms could be champion or supporter. So, the thing with advocacy is it can look so different for every single individual involved. There's no specific mold to how it works or anything like that. But for those of you who are like me and would appreciate clear examples of advocacy, I have a few for you. The first is that you can share on social media, specifically around causes and issues that are important to you. The others, you can write op-eds. These are things that can go into magazines and newspapers. You can share your story, whether that is with peers or policymakers. There's lots of things that you can do as an advocate doing advocacy. If you're still confused on what advocates do, that's okay. The simple answer is advocates lead with a whole lot of ease. The L in lead is for listen. Listening is such an important part of advocacy. In fact, I'd argue that it's more important to listen than it is to talk in advocacy. Listening helps us to stay informed and aware of the things happening, not only in our own experiences, but in the experiences of the people affected by our advocacy. The first E in lead is for empower. As advocates, we have to understand the importance of sharing space with others. Part of our role is to empower others to share their story, build their confidence, and build their capacity. The second E in lead is for expressing your views. Expressing your views in a way that is productive to the work that you're doing is a skill. It requires a deep understanding of the topic you're advocating for in order to explain the causes and your suggested solutions. Expressing your views is a very important part of advocacy. The last E in lead is for educate. I know that when we think of advocacy and educating, we often think of educating policymakers and people in power. And yes, that is part of it, but also part of the role of being an advocate is educating our peers, community, and other individuals. The A in lead is for actively challenge. And yeah, I mean the traditional things like the system or the way things are happening, but also actively challenging yourself. The more people you know, the more experiences you have, the more lessons learned. Sometimes actively challenging requires us to challenge our own beliefs. This makes us great advocates and allows for tremendous growth. The last letter in lead is D, and D is for diversify. As advocates, we have to seek out new information as a way to diversify the knowledge we have. We gain understanding of different experiences, different people, and even different techniques. Diversify is also a reminder as an advocate that at every opportunity possible that we add unique voice and experiences to the spaces we're in. And now that we've gone through what lead means, you have a better understanding of the roles and responsibilities of an advocate. Remember, in order for us to be leaders, we have to listen empower, express our views, educate, actively challenge, and diversify. So, there are a lot of variables that make the advocacy experience so unique and different for every advocate. One of those variables is the type of advocacy you're doing. So, for the sake of keeping this simple and intro to advocacy, we'll say there are three types of advocacy. For this part of the lesson, let's say the three are personal, local, and national. Some examples of personal advocacy would include self advocacy and family advocacy. Some examples of local advocacy could include peer advocacy and community advocacy. And lastly, some examples of national advocacy could include system advocacy and policy advocacy. So, personal advocacy starts with you. That's you right there. How cute. So, we advocate for ourselves all the time without realizing it. We advocate for ourselves with doctors, in schools, and for those of us who have child welfare experience, we advocate for ourselves in court. The cool thing with personal advocacy is that this also affects your family. We often advocate for our family in the same ways. And again, for those of us who have child welfare experience, we're often advocating for our family in a courtroom as well. So, most people, even if they're not system involved, practice personal advocacy. But that's not where it has to stop for you. You can practice other types of advocacy as well. So, when deciding on what type of advocacy is right for us, let's try to understand a few things. We'll use an analogy for this part. I love bowling, so that should make this a little fun. So, let's start here. This is a bowling ball. I think we're pretty familiar with what that looks like. Let's say this is your capacity. And here is a bowling pin. Let's say that this is the responsibility and task associated with that advocacy. As you are advocating for more and more people on higher levels, the task and responsibilities and that pin gets bigger and bigger until we realize there's no way this ball is going to knock over these pins. So, what do we do? So, unfortunately, the tasks and responsibilities don't go away. So, we're not going to be able to shrink the pins, which just means somehow we're going to have to grow our bowling ball. We're going to have to grow our capacity and our knowledge. So, before we could talk about growing our bowling ball, we have to first talk about what's even in our bowling ball. So, let's erase this. So, let's start with this purple circle. Let's say this represents your lived experience. When you're doing personal advocacy, like advocating for yourself or your family, your lived experience plays a huge part in how you advocate. Let's say this blue circle is all the knowledge you have on that topic. And let's say this little green one is all the information you have on how to be a speaker. Not very much in here, but you'll notice that the purple circle takes up the majority of your bowling ball. So for local advocacy, you'll notice there's a few more things in your bowling ball. Along with the things you've already had, like your lived experience, you may have also added some formal education, like taking a few classes or read a few books. You might have also formed some relationships with community members. When we get to national advocacy, you'll notice there's a whole lot of other things. You might have learned more about policies and processes. You might have taken a class or two on writing and sharing your story that way. You've built your capacity in other areas. The last thing I want to note when you're building your capacity or growing your bowling ball is that if you notice, your lived experience stays the same size. And though you may be advocating on a larger scale and for more people, you'll notice that it doesn't change much. Other things can change. You can build your skills on topics, your knowledge, your relationships, your networking. But the larger of a scale you advocate on, the more you have to take into account other people's lived experience. And now that we've talked a little bit about how to grow your bowling ball or how to build your capacity, the next part is, where do you start? My advice is reaching out and finding local advisory boards, doing your own research on topics, finding internships, and traditional school if that's for you. When you're willing to put in all the hard work it takes to grow your bowling ball, it's always sure to be a strike. So while they get those pins set back up, let's take a moment to get to know you. So far in this session, I've talked a lot about what advocacy is and what advocates can do, but I have a few questions for you now. All right, for this section, I'm going to ask you a few questions. Pause if you need to. We have time. If you're watching with others, feel free to share amongst each other. All right, time to pull out pens and paper. What are some big goals you have for your future? Take some time to think about it. What's important to you? What do you hope to accomplish in the future? Does advocacy tie into your goals? How or how not? What type of advocacy would you like to be a part of? You could choose more than one or none at all if you'd like. List 3 topics that you would like to advocate for. Get specific. Think back on your lived experience and your passions. Now that you've answered all of those questions, you probably have a better understanding of what advocacy can look like for you. If you're ready to get started, here are some places to look. You can always reach out to your caseworker, CASA, or GAL. You can reach out to your local advisory boards. I'd begin studying on the topic that you want to advocate for. Start building your network. Get to know people. Social media is a great place for this. You can reach out to Foster Greatness. And if you know any alumni, that's also a great place to start. With all this talk of bowling, I think I'm going to call some friends and go bowling myself. But before I leave, let me leave you with this. No matter what type of advocacy you decide to partake in or what lane you even find yourself in, we know that you are going to do amazing things. Have a great day and go be great.